again? Why does she cry every night like this? God, please make the pain stop. Auntie Rebecca, is that you?
What if I told you that the woman you envy the most is crying every single night, and you would never know it because of the smile she wears in the morning? My name is Martha, and for 3 years, I hated my neighbor without her ever knowing it. Her name was Rebecca. She lived in the big house directly opposite mine, the one with the white gate and the flowers planted in neat rows along the fence. Every morning, like clockwork, I would hear the gentle hum of a car engine as her driver pulled out of the compound, taking her children to the best private school in town. I would stand by my window, broom in hand, watching her wave goodbye to them with that wide, effortless smile, dressed in clothes that looked like they belonged in a magazine. And every morning, that smile cut into me like a blade. My own house was small, 2 rooms and a tiny kitchen with a roof that leaked whenever the rain came hard. My husband Derek worked as a driver for a transport company, and most months the money finished before the month did. I sold pepper soup in the evenings just to make ends meet, standing over a hot pot while my hands smelled of onions and smoke, while across the road, Rebecca's kitchen smelled of something else entirely, the rich aroma of stew, of a life that didn't have to struggle. Look at her, I would mutter to myself, stirring my pot. What did she do to deserve all this? She just married well, that's all. Some people are just lucky. I said this so many times that my own children began to repeat it. My daughter Clara once asked me, "Mommy, why can't we be like Auntie Rebecca's family?" And I had no answer for her except bitterness. Every Sunday at church, Rebecca would walk in wearing lace and gold, greeting everyone with that same smile, and the women would gather around her like she was royalty. Pastor would call her name during offering time. "Sister Rebecca, thank you for your generous seed," and the whole congregation would clap. Meanwhile, I sat at the back in my one good dress that I had worn for the past 4 years, watching, counting, comparing. I didn't know then that smiles can be the thickest walls a person builds. I didn't know that behind that white gate, behind those lace blouses, behind that car with the leather seats, something was breaking, slowly, quietly, every single night. I didn't know that the woman I envied was praying for the kind of peace that even my small, leaking house already had. But that night, everything I thought I knew was about to change, because that was the night I heard the first sound. It was past midnight when I first heard it. I had just finished watching the last pot from my evening pepper soup business, and Derek was already snoring beside our 2 children who were sharing the other mattress in the room. The night was quiet, the kind of quiet you only get in a neighborhood where everyone has gone to bed exhausted from the day's hustle. Then I heard it. A muffled cry, coming from across the road. I sat up slowly, my heart skipping. At first I thought maybe it was a cat, or maybe one of the neighborhood dogs that like to fight over scraps near the gutter. But then it came again, and this time I recognized it. It was a human voice, a woman's voice, and it sounded like someone in pain. I crept to my window and peeked through the curtain. Rebecca's house stood across the road, dark except for one light, the small window on the side of the house, the one I always assumed was a storeroom. The light flickered, like someone was moving around with a lamp. Maybe armed robbers, I whispered to myself, my chest tightening. I almost woke Derek, but then the sound stopped. Silence returned. I told myself I was imagining things, that tiredness was playing tricks on my ears, and I went back to bed. But 2 nights later, it happened again. This time, the sound was longer, a groan, low and trembling, followed by what sounded like someone trying very hard not to scream, biting down on the sound, swallowing it, the way you do when you don't want anyone to hear you suffering. I lay there in the darkness, staring the ceiling, my mind racing. Rebecca? The same Rebecca that smiled every morning like she didn't have a single worry in this world. The same woman whose laughter rang out so loud during Owambe parties that the whole street could hear it. Maybe it's not her, I told Derek the next morning as I prepared his breakfast. Maybe it's one of the house helps. You know rich people, they treat their workers anyhow. Maybe somebody is suffering for that woman and she doesn't even care. Derek shrugged. Why does it concern you, Martha? Just face your front. Rebecca's business is Rebecca's business. But it gnawed at me. For days, I watched that house more closely than I had ever watched it before. Not with envy this time, but with something else. Suspicion. Maybe even a small, shameful hope that I had finally found a crack in the perfect picture. Maybe I thought life was not as sweet over there as everybody believed. I didn't know that the truth I was about to uncover would break my heart completely and force me to look at my own life and my own jealousy in a way I never had before. Because that Friday night, the sound didn't just come once. It came again, and this time I decided I would find out exactly what was happening behind that white gate, no matter what it cost me. If this story has gripped you already, don't scroll past. Hit that subscribe button now, because what Martha discovers next will change how you see everyone around you. That Friday night, I couldn't sleep at all. The sounds came in waves. First, a soft whimper around 11 p.m., then silence, then around 1 a.m., something heavier. A cry that rose and then was quickly muffled, like someone pressing a pillow over their own mouth to keep from waking the house. I sat by my window for almost 2 hours, watching that small side light flicker on and off. My body was tired, but my mind would not let me rest. Something told me this was not normal. This was not the sound of a house help being scolded. This was the sound of someone in real deep pain. By morning, I made a decision. I would go over there, not to gossip, not to spy for stories to carry to the other women on the street, but because something in my spirit would not let me sit still anymore. I waited until I saw Rebecca's gateman open the gate for her driver to take the children to school. Then I crossed the road, my wrapper tied tightly around my waist, my heart pounding like I was about to commit a crime. "Good morning, ma." I greeted the gateman, a quiet older man named Festus. "Please, is madam around?" I wanted to greet her. Festus looked at me strangely. We had lived across from each other for 3 years, and I had never once come to greet Rebecca properly, but he let me in. The compound was even more beautiful up close. Flowers, a small fountain that wasn't working, expensive tiles leading to the front door. But as I got closer, I noticed something I had never seen from across the road. Empty drug packets in the dustbin by the side of the house. Strips and strips of them, and medical bottles. So many medical bottles. Before I could process what I was seeing, the front door opened. Rebecca stood there, but she did not look like the Rebecca I knew from church, from her car window, from her gate every morning. Her eyes were sunken, dark circles underneath them like bruises. Her skin, usually glowing, looked pale and tired. She was holding the door frame for support, like she didn't trust her own legs to hold her up. "Martha," she said, her voice hoarse, surprised. "Is everything okay?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. I just stared at her, at this woman I had envied for 3 solid years, standing in front of me looking like she hadn't slept properly in months. "Rebecca," I finally said, my voice shaking, "what is happening to you?" Her face changed instantly. The mask, the smile, the strength, it cracked right in front of my eyes. And for the first time since I had known her, Rebecca began to cry. Not the soft, polite tears people cry in public. Real tears. The kind that come from years of carrying something heavy, alone. "Nobody was supposed to know," she whispered, sinking down onto those cold tiled steps of her beautiful porch, her hands trembling in her lap, as she told me a story that broke something open inside me. 3 years ago, she began. I started feeling pains in my body. Small at first. I thought it was just stress, just tiredness from running the house and the children's school runs. But it got worse. The pain would come at night, mostly, sharp, like something twisting inside me. I went to one hospital, then another, then another. The doctors finally found it, a condition in my organs that required constant management, expensive medication, and regular hospital visits. Not something that would kill her quickly, but something that would make every single day, and especially every night, a battle. The pain is worst at night, she said, wiping her face with the back of her hand. That's when my body finally rests from moving around all day, and that's when it all catches up with me. I bite my pillow so the children won't wake up. I cry into my blanket so the house help won't hear and start asking questions. I sat down beside her on those cold tiled steps, forgetting completely about my wrapper, my pepper soup pot waiting at home, everything. But Rebecca, I said slowly, your house, your car, everything looks so perfect. She let out a small, broken laugh. Martha, do you know how much I spend on hospital bills every single month? More than what my husband's salary used to be when we got married. We had to sell one of our properties in the village just to keep up with my treatment. The car you see, my husband bought it 5 years ago before all this started. We are managing it like everything else. We are managing. I thought about all those Sundays in church, watching her drop offerings with a smile, the congregation clapping for Sister Rebecca's generous seed. And church, I asked quietly. Rebecca's eyes filled again. That smile you see at church, Martha, that is the only place I allow myself to pretend for 2 hours that my body isn't fighting me. I smile because if I don't, people will start asking questions, and then the questions become gossip, and then the gossip becomes pity, and I cannot carry pity on top of everything else I am already carrying. My chest tightened. All this time, all those mornings I had stood by my window seething with envy, all those Sundays I had compared my one dress to her lace blouses, Rebecca had been fighting a war I knew nothing about. I used to envy you, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I used to look at your house, your car, your smile, and I would complain to my husband, to my children, even to God, asking why life favored you and not me. Rebecca turned to look at me, and instead of anger, I saw something like relief in her eyes, the relief of finally being seen, truly seen by someone. Martha, she said softly, I used to look at your house too, small as it is, and I used to think that woman, even with her struggles, she sleeps peacefully at night. Nobody in that house is in pain. That, to me, was something I envied. We sat there in silence, two women who had spent years admiring each other's lives from a distance, neither of us seeing the full picture. But what Rebecca said next would change everything, because she was about to ask me for something I never expected. Martha, Rebecca said, taking my hand in both of hers, can I ask you something? Of course, I said. Can you sit with me sometimes? At night, when the pain comes. I don't need you to do anything. I don't want to be alone with it anymore. My husband travels a lot for work, and the children are too young to understand. And the house help, she's a young girl. I don't want to frighten her. I just need someone who knows, someone I don't have to pretend in front of. My eyes filled with tears. Here was a woman who had everything I once envied, and all she was asking for, the one thing money could not buy, was simple human company. Someone to sit beside her in the dark. I will, Rebecca, I said, gripping her hand tightly. Rebecca, I will. That night, I told Derek everything. He listened quietly, and when I finished, he shook his head slowly. Martha, you have been carrying anger toward that woman for years, and all this time she has been carrying pain you knew nothing about.
Sometimes what looks like a blessing is just somebody's battlefield, dressed up nicely so the world won't stare. From that night on, things changed. Whenever I heard the soft sounds from across the road, I no longer stayed in my bed wondering. I would quietly cross the road and Festus would let me in without a word. He had been told to expect me. I would sit beside Rebecca's bed, sometimes holding her hand, sometimes just being there while she breathed through the pain, sometimes praying softly with her until the worst of it passed. I learned that Rebecca's husband, Gideon, was a quiet, gentle man who had spent years watching his wife suffer and feeling helpless about it. I learned that Rebecca's own mother had passed away from a similar illness, and Rebecca lived with the fear that she might be following the same path, a fear she had never told anyone, not even her husband. One night, as I sat beside her, she squeezed my hand and said, "Martha, do you know what the hardest part of all this has been? It's not even the pain, it's the loneliness. Everyone sees the house, the car, the clothes, the smile, and they assume I have no problems. So nobody checks on me. Nobody asks if I'm okay, because why would Rebecca, of all people, need checking on?" Her words sat heavy in my chest. I thought of all the people in my own life who I had assumed were fine simply because of how their lives looked from the outside. I thought of how quick I had been to judge, to compare, to envy, without ever once asking the most important question: are you okay? Word slowly began to spread on our streets, not through gossip, but through genuine concern. The women who used to admire Rebecca's lace blouses from a distance began to visit her, not to ask for favors, but simply to sit with her, to pray with her, to bring her soup when she was too weak to cook. And then, one Sunday morning, something happened in church that none of us, especially Rebecca, would ever forget. It was a regular Sunday service, the kind where pastor would call out names for the offering, and Rebecca's name was usually one of the first to be mentioned. But that morning, before the offering even began, pastor paused and looked out at the congregation. "Before we continue," he said, "I want to use this moment to talk about something. We often celebrate people for what we can see. Their cars, their houses, their clothes, their smiles. We clap for them, we admire them, sometimes we even envy them, but we rarely stop to ask what is behind the smile." He looked directly at Rebecca, who sat stiffly in her usual seat, clearly unsure of what was coming. Sister Rebecca has been a faithful member of this church for many years. Many of you have admired her, some of you have envied her. But what most of you didn't know is that for the past 3 years, Sister Rebecca has been fighting a serious health battle, quietly, with dignity, without complaint, while still showing up here every Sunday with a smile, still giving, still serving. A gasp went through the congregation. I saw heads turn toward Rebecca, saw the shock on the faces of women who had spent years whispering about her perfect life. Rebecca's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She hadn't given Pastor permission to share this, but later she told me she felt nothing but relief. The weight of pretending finally did not belong to her alone anymore. Today, Pastor said, instead of receiving from Sister Rebecca, this congregation is going to give to her. Every kobo we collect today will go towards her medical treatment. What happened next, I will never forget. Women who once gossiped about Rebecca's lucky life stood up one after another, dropping whatever they had into that basket. Men who barely knew her name came forward. Even the children emptied their small coin purses. I stood up too. I didn't have much, just enough for that week's soup ingredients, but I dropped every naira of it into that basket, and for the first time in years, I felt something other than envy when I looked at Rebecca. I felt love, real, honest love. After the service, Rebecca hugged me so tightly, I could feel her shaking with tears. "Martha," she whispered, "thank you for seeing me, truly seeing me." Today, Rebecca and I are the closest of friends. Our children play together. Our husbands have become friends too. And every night when the pain comes for her, she no longer suffers alone because there is always someone there, sitting with her in the dark, reminding her she is not alone. As for me, I learned a lesson I will carry for the rest of my life. Not every smile means happiness, and not every beautiful house hides a beautiful life. The people we envy the most are often fighting battles we cannot see, and the kindest thing we can ever do is stop comparing and start caring. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Raina Tales for more powerful real-life inspired stories, because the next story might just change someone's life. See you in the next one.